Get ready for another microdose. And hey, if this information is jiving with you, then check out the full episode. The link is in the show notes. Enjoy the ride.
And when I started to treat mental health patients, I kept wondering, we're learning about how these medications have such a devastating impact on things like the metabolic panel. So they are effective and they've saved the lives of many of my patients, but they also have side effects. So why are we not asking about diet and exercise? What are you eating? What else are we doing? Do you have a mindfulness practice? And I think that that gap really was very apparent to me. And very early on, it became more apparent when a patient was a very young resident, a very junior and new, and kind of yelled at me, telling me I'd caused him to gain weight because he read on the Prozac label that, that's one of the side effects. But I knew from the data in front of me that wasn't the case. But he was also drinking this very, very large cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee, which is a favorite in Boston. And being a timid resident, I sort of said, let's call him Bill. And I said, so, what did you put in your coffee today? I knew that the question was important. I may not have known why at the time, because I sort of was thinking to myself, he's talking about his weight, but he's not really looking at what he's doing. And when I asked the question, he told me, and we calculated it. We sat down and we calculated it online. I'm not much of a calorie counter, but this made sense in terms of translating the information. He was using a quarter cup or more processed creamer, and then about 8 teaspoons of sugar, and having it every single day, sometimes one and another half of those. And he realized in that moment, it was a very big, it was like a light bulb went off for him. And it was my aha moment, because I could see him compute that, wow, this is something I can change. I'm consuming all of these calories. I'm not even eating something and just drinking this coffee. So that really led me to want to explore more about nutrition, study it, and put that into my evaluations with patients, and it grew from there. My tryptocalorie score was really related to Julia Child, understanding that was later on in her life that she went. And I thought, why not me? And putting it together came with an opportunity to start my own small clinical service and bring these areas together. And that's a long story, but that's kind of how it came together.
Wow. Well, that's fantastic, Dr. Naidoo, and very thankful that you've made this journey and that you've written this book that I know is going to help so many people and is already helping so many people with the work that you do. I want to talk about the mind-gut connection and the microbiome. Can you walk us through what the microbiome is and then why the gut-mind connection is so important?
Great. So let's start with a simple thing. If you have a headache, you might take a Tylenol, you might take a Motrin, you swallow it, you drink some water. What happens? Maybe 10 minutes, a half hour, headache goes away. But think about that for a second. You're swallowing it. It's going to your digestive tract, to your gut, but it's impacting largely the headache, which is, located in your brain. So when we think about it, the neuroscience of the gut microbiome and the connections, and, we'll unpack this together, is neuroscience over the last couple of decades. Although Hippocrates spoke to it eons ago, the science had to follow, the research had to follow. But that gut-brain connection actually unfolds the food-mood connection, because the gut and brain are separate parts of the body, but they rise from the exact same cells in the human embryo. They divide up apart and they're different locations. Then they're connected by the 10th cranial nerve, which is the vagus nerve. And that acts like a chemical messaging system, like a two-way superhighway, allowing for messages to be transmitted all the time, up and down. So if you think about that and then realize that 90% or more of the serotonin receptors and serotonin itself made in the gut, interacting with those microbes, you start to realize and put the pictures together around a few things. If someone has ever taken a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, an SSRI like Prozac or Zoloft, they often experience gastrointestinal discomfort. And now we understand why. Another important thing in these times to understand, because the gut is so powerful, is that 70% of the immune system is there. How you eat is affecting your immunity as well. So putting these different pieces together, you start to understand that The connection is there. Just like that pill you took for a headache and that's being broken down in the gut, so is the food. And when the food reaches the gut, you have 39 odd trillion bacteria that live there. There are 5 different types, not just bacteria, 5 types, but the bacteria are the most studied. And on a day that, you're eating the healthier meal, the good microbes thrive. They're being fed fiber from veggies and fruit and beans, nuts, seeds, and legumes, and they thrive and they do well and they can do their job. On a day that you're going to the fast food lane and you're having the milkshakes and French fries and kind of the more fast food, the bad microbes thrive because they love all those ingredients that we've usually thought are only related to our waistlines, but those foods are also affecting our brain and our mind. But those bad microbes thrive. They start to set up the gut for inflammation and imbalance, and they start to damage the breakdown products of those foods, start to damage the single cell gut lining, which is very delicate. And over time, it gets to form conditions like leaky gut. And that inflammation is very, very much a factor that has been researched to underlie conditions like depression, anxiety, cognitive disorders, and more. So inflammation is really now a part of the newer thinking in how these conditions arise. That's a long explanation, but an unpacking of where the science is at with trying to understand that gut-brain connection.
And one of the, thank you for that. One of the major contributors, and you come back to this again and again in a book, is the Western diet and also the Mediterranean eating pattern. So, and I like the way you describe it. It's like, hey, if I'm eating good foods, right, I begin to feel good. If I'm eating, bad foods, which, we'll talk about, that the Western diet is just not a good diet at all. I mean, so what is the Western diet? Why is it so destructive to our minds and our bodies? And then we'll kind of jump into, the health, life and health affirming effects of the Mediterranean eating pattern that you discuss throughout the book and mention as a cure or a way of keeping clear, staying healthy, and in less inflammation as well.
That's a great question, because the Western diet is also called the Standard American Diet, and the acronym is SAD for a good reason. It is sort of sad.
It is sad. It makes us sad.
As an American, I say that it is sad. But here's the thing, we can't fight the food industrialization and the industrialization process, which really changed the nature of food and sort of moved us from wholesome whole foods to really learning convenience food, microwave dinners, frozen foods, packaged processed foods, things like that. So the things that we have been thinking all this time are bad for our waistline or bad for type 2 diabetes, or, your doctor might say you need to eat differently for hypertension, actually also impact the brain. So, processed, ultra-processed junk foods and fast foods, you may or may not be surprised to know that fast food French fries contain sugar. They contain added sugar. You don't taste the sugar, but the research and development taught food companies that makes them super delicious and makes them hyper palatable. But what does that mean? When I go to the drive-thru, I upsize, and when I upsize, I eat the whole bag. So the craving set in, and I want that whole bag of French fries. So that's the reason they add sugar to it. They make it more delicious that way. So there's that category: artificial sweeteners, processed vegetable oils, the trans fats. Fortunately, there's less of them in our foods now, but you do have to be on the lookout for them. And, the things that we have known for a while are not the healthiest, but they also actually impact the brain.
Hey, thanks for joining us on this journey. Small doses lead to big changes. If you're vibing with this snippet, then take a listen to the full episode by clicking the link in the show notes. If you would like to plug in deeper to what we're doing, head to mentalkingmindfulness.com or text MTM to 33777. Until next time, peace.